So I would like to welcome you all to our session on supply chain transparency. For those who do not know me, my name is Manfred Harder. I'm a senior partner with Roland Berger. Roland Berger is the only global management consultancy of European origin, and I lead its aerospace and defense practice, a team of A&D enthusiasts globally, wherever there's aerospace. And I'm very proud to have three distinguished, the fourth unfortunately fell prey to the snow in Munich, three distinguished panelists with me today on the floor. And I would like you all to, first of all, welcome Marjolaine Grange. Marjolaine is EVP Industry Purchasing and Performance for Safran, and she's responsible, amongst others, for activities regarding the transformation of supply chain processes and also resilience. She has a special attraction for supply chain, as it relies a lot on mathematics and digital, which both resonates for her as an engineer. Welcome, Marjolaine.
Thank you.
I have to send apologies of Sebastian Peters. He was effectively caught in the big snowstorm. I think you've all heard about it in Munich. His flight was cancelled 4 times and he could not make it, but he sends his apologies and regards. He's member of the management board of Airbus GmbH, the aerostructure company that was recently formed. Let me then introduce Juraj Zamecnik. Please. Juraj is the founder and CEO of 3IPK, a company that develops and delivers cutting-edge blockchain solutions for space, aviation, and defense industries. 3IPK solutions guarantee authenticity, integrity, and traceability of data, and brings data transparency to our supply chain. And last but not least, I'm very happy to have Christoph Zammert with us.
Morning.
Christoph heads the A320 family program at Airbus, the most successful commercial aircraft program. And as you all know, he faces a very challenging ramp-up. So for him, a resilient supply chain is not only a must, but a key factor to success. So thanks a lot for being with us today. I suggest before we start the discussion, let me share a few ideas with you. If I could ask the organizers to put the presentation on the screen. Do I need a clicker or will you do it? Okay, no? Fine. Before we get into this, let me all ask you one question, and I just want you to raise your hands. Who of you thinks that your supply chain was out of control in the past 2 years? Please raise your hands. I think you're a little bit shy. Okay, let me try again. Who thinks the supply chain will be in control next year? That sounds more realistic. And there's good reason for that. And I think Shauna showed a much nicer slide for all those reasons earlier on than you see it here. I mean, we come out of this, I would say, quite unparalleled, what we call polycrisis environment. Yeah? But there's 2 insights there. The first insight, expect this polycrisis environment to stay on. There are so many factors that can actually produce disturbance. Yeah? And the second insight, I think, for all of us was we discovered that all of a sudden it's the lower tiers that matter. And we knew nothing about what happened in the lower tiers, be it semiconductors, be it raw materials, etc. Polymers was a big one. Yeah? So I think we need to just take it for granted. This kind of disruption potential will continue. We need to adapt to it. We asked the same question I just asked you, many of your peers. Recently conducted a study together with BDLI in the German aerospace supply chain. More than 100 companies actually participated. And one of the key questions really was the one I asked you: how severe was the disruption? Yeah? And very similar as here, qualified majority says extremely severe. Rest says okay, but those are typically ones that have kind of local supply chains or good buffer stocks. Yeah? What was really more interesting was, out of those 60% who said the supply chain is in trouble, 75% said it's an issue of transparency. Transparency is not there, and as long as it's not going to be there, we won't get out of those disruptions. So if you think at transparency, I mean, there's an upstream and a downstream way of looking at transparency. You will see a lot of tools and approaches are there. Yeah? In the upstream, I mean, okay, the aircraft production rates are being communicated by the OEM, but here starts the problem. The tier one adds or subtracts something to it, communicates different targets into the supply chain, and so on, going down the tiers. So you end up with different truths, yeah? And you end up in the end with something which we all learned during COVID, which is the bullwhip effect. And it's not much different if you go downstream, the other way. Yeah? How consistent, how coherent, how complete is data on, let's say, capacity utilization, for example, that's being brought up the value chain up to the OEM so that they can plan and actually plan their business for that. Yeah? So, to make a long story short, there are approaches, but they are not sort of end-to-end seamless, and that's something we need to talk about, why this is the case. And we have 5 hypotheses or guidelines to make transparency end-to-end work. And this is what I would like to sort of throw into the discussion here. First of all, we believe that it needs to be driven top-down. So it needs to be originated from the OEM and flown down in a consistent manner into the supply chain. What was very often the issue of many approaches in the past is that the extent of the information required was very often prohibitive. Yeah? So you need to be very pragmatic about what you need in terms of information, what you ask for. And to go along with it, it's not only ask, it's also give. It needs to be a give and take, a win-win situation. If you give data, you also get something back. Another principle. Be agnostic. Yeah, the world is not only a supply chain of one large OEM, there's at least a second one. So it needs to be something which, viewed from the eyes of the tier one or the tier two, works for everybody. And last but not least, a huge, huge topic. Yeah? Do we all adhere to the same standards of security in terms of data protection and cybersecurity? 5 guidelines, 5 hypotheses for our discussion. And do remember, if you have questions, please put them into Slido and we'll try to weave them into the discussion. Great. Christoph, can I start with you? Why is supply chain transparency important for you? I already said it earlier on, but I think your words are better than mine.
I think it's obvious for everybody. Airbus, we are an industry which procures 80% of its value creation from the supply chain. I don't know if you have these numbers in mind, but today we have 2 million parts that hit our warehouses every day. And this is in a context where, for the A320 family, we are somewhere around rate 55, and we intend to go to rate 75 by 26. And if you look this on an Airbus overall perspective, we will be producing 100 aircraft every month. And without supply chain transparency, we either have missing parts or we have huge buffer stocks, and both is not sustainable. So I think, and for me, and program management is a lot about managing risks. It's a key factor to securing what we have to secure, because not delivering aircraft, it's a pity for us, but it's also hampering the growth of our customers, and sometimes on the back of it, the associated economies.
Thanks. Marjolaine, you are the linking pin between the OEM and, I would say, the wider supply chain. What's your view on that?
Yes, as I think as for Airbus, Safran has an international supply chain, so I would insist that it's also the global aspect of the supply chain which is key, with thousands of suppliers. And therefore, if with the up and downs that we have been experiencing in the past and now the up that we have to achieve, if we don't properly share the forecast and the long-term forecast, there is very few chance that all of those suppliers will get coordinated by themselves. So this is why, for me, sharing transparently data is critical to make sure everybody is paced at the same level and the same expected level. And today, what we experience, yes, I hope there is a good collaboration between Airbus, Safran, and most of the tier ones to tier two. Now, I think the challenge today is how deep the information is cascading into the supply chain and how prepared are some commodities, somehow like raw material, like special processes, for the ramp up, and what is the quality of the information that they get.
Quality of information is probably a good way for you, right, to sort of come into the debate. You could be seen more as an enabler to companies like Airbus, Safran, and the supply chain to make it happen. What's the importance of supply chain transparency for you, and where do you come in?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. As we heard both from Airbus and Safran, the distributed supply chain, distributed information sharing, and the required transparency which comes with that is really at the core of what we do with S3IPK. So we try to understand how can we deliver technologically enabled trust and therefore transparency through the supply chains, how to address challenges around the transparency of data, its authenticity, but at the same time, a certain unwillingness to share the data throughout the supply chains, especially beyond tier one.
Let me just sort of weave in a question which just came in and which you may want to complement. How do you create trust in a supplier squeezing environment? Tensions are going up, yeah? And does technology actually help there, or do we need other means?
I don't know.
You're the supplier. Are
yeah.
you feeling squeezed?
I'm feeling squeezed. I don't know. I don't know exactly what is behind squeezed. Still, I think the more the environment is, as described by Shona in her presentation, the more complex the environment is, I think the more we will need to increase the transparency and also the information sharing. Yeah, definitely, I think. And what is in front of us is probably not simpler than what we have been experiencing in the past. So the more complex we have to handle, the more we will need a good sharing of the information. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Let's get back to those 5 hypotheses. And the first one, Christoph, you will remember, is how to drive it top-down in supply chain. And I would like to ask you 2 questions. First one is, what is Airbus doing in that respect? Yeah, and how do you cope with? And picking up one of the questions from the audience, is there also a case for driving it bottom-up? I think which may more be a question for you, Marjolaine, by the way. But
okay, if you answer the question, I will start with my view on that, and I think it only works both ways. If someone decides to do something top-down and it's not followed bottom-up, or the supply chain is not capable to act accordingly, then all the top-down ideas, they were for nothing. What is Airbus doing? We are trying to do our share, and I think it's many elements. First of all, it's being transparent about realistic plannings, and also sharing in a transparent manner changes and evolutions that we have in this planning. Because I have the impression that, especially also coming out of COVID and the supply chain disruptions that we have been facing, trust somewhat has vanished, and people tend to do more of contract management, trying to protect their bases. And this is not fostering a virtuous behavior at either side of the supply chain. And this is something that we have to overcome. And then obviously it's working with the right level of tools that allow for supply chain transparency. If you look at the number of SAP systems that we have, having an aggregated view on demand and translating this into a clear message into the supply chain, which has to be our contribution, sometimes is a bit of a challenge. But then obviously, and I guess we will come to this at a later stage, transparency is very good, but also it has some limits for us. because we are a very global and interconnected family and industry, which also includes our competitors. So there is a lot where we want to be transparent, and there are a couple of points where we cannot be that transparent. So matching all this is the challenge, but we at Airbus, we are ready to do our share to make it work.
Marjolaine, any views on this bottom-up topic?
I think it starts by top-down, of course. That's sharing the information. I think our responsibility as OEMs is stability. I think we've been struggling in 2022 around stability of demand. And we've been better in 2023 because what creates, I think, mistrust into the supply chain is the lack of stability. I mean, if you ask a supplier to raise its capacity and at the end of the year you say, oh, by the way, in fact, I don't need this capacity, I think it somehow creates mistrust, and the following year they will not probably raise their capacity. So that's, I think, our share of the job. And beyond stability, we need to share long-term horizons. And I think Airbus is really doing the job, which is helping us as well, showing perspective, because on the long run, if you want to invest in capacity, you need perspectives. Yep. So that's for the top-down. Now for the bottom-up, we are collaborating, at least at Safran, and Airbus is also collaborating with us on the load capacity assessments, where, of course, we separate the vision for us and the vision for the global other customers. But that's definitely where we are expecting also transparency, is how the supplier is highlighting the bottlenecks and highlighting the needs that they have, for example, for new investment, for hiring. Each time we are able to collaborate with such transparency with our suppliers, we are able to find solutions, whether in supporting investment or in supporting talent recruitment. So that's probably not just a top-down, it's a top-down and then a bottom-up.
Let's move to the second topic about what is the right or pragmatic extent of information that should be shared, sort of depth of information. And Juraj, I was wondering what your view is on that. Where do you typically see the roadblocks, why people don't want to share, and how would you circumvent this?
Yes, so one of the challenges that I believe are there within the aerospace supply chains or other elements, or for example in defense industries as well, where you have the requirement for traceability of information and paradoxically at the same time for kind of siloing of information, because the top of the supply chain does not have direct contracts with tier -4, etc., etc. So there we believe the technology-based trust, for example, through the technology such as blockchain, can bring real value, because you are able to guarantee the authenticity of data, which is exchanged, and at the same time, its traceability without requiring, for example, the individual parties in the supply chain to share all of their data on some single cloud. Because this is obviously, for IP reasons, for security reasons, for data privacy reasons, always a challenge. So we believe that the technologies, such as the one of blockchain, is really a complementary element, allowing this kind of trust increase. And increasing trust between contracting parties means decreasing the transactional cost at the end of the day.
Picking up on what you said and also what you said, Marjolaine, one question here from the audience, and I think that's for you, Christoph. Can the OEM forecast reliability and commitment be enhanced? Which level of flexibility remains needed?
So could you repeat the beginning? Okay.
The question has disappeared. Can basically the OEM forecasting level be enhanced, be more stable? Yeah. And what kind of flexibility do you need? That's the question.
Of course, and I guess the supplier community thinks very much that we have to increase and improve our forecast reliability, and this is something that we can still do. In the end, it's a question of joint risk and opportunity management, and it works, and this is probably what the essence of this panel is about, a mutual trust with which we then can share openly our risks that we have, the constraints that we have in our system. And it's not only something, to take the words that were mentioned before, which is required to be done bottom up, it starts top down. And yes, But this is something we have to exchange together. Flexibility is always needed because there is no perfect world and there will always be disruptions. So yes.
Which kind of brings us to the win-win situation that we need to generate. Yeah? And maybe Marjolaine, what would you, two questions, yeah, kind of tied together. What would you expect from the OEM in return for the transparency that you provide? But the audience is asking on top of that, which gain sharing mechanism do you envisage with tier 2 and tier 3?
So it's
not quite sure how to qualify gain sharing, but
yeah, it's a vast question. But I think the first benefit that we're going to get together is stop running everywhere looking for parts. And that's also important. I think there's going to be a roundtable around talents, retraction. I think if our teams are spending their day running after parts, I'm not sure they're going to stay very long into the business. So that's at least a first benefit, is that if we can run our business a little bit more by the books of what supply chain is telling us, I think we're gonna pass a step and avoid also commercial debates, etc. Avoid having to unstabilize the demand because of major bottlenecks, and that's for me anyway a target that we should all have to get back to a more normal situation of supply chain management. That's first thing. Second thing, and is for tier 2, tier 3, I think you've shown a graph where when we reach commodities like raw material, currently, I don't believe that the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 are able to manage properly, or I mean to have the levers in front of the raw material bottlenecks that we are experiencing. And definitely having, at least on some commodities, a very transparent cascading and bottom-up consolidation of what are the real demands will help us as OEMs support the full supply chain into the management of such commodities. So that's also, for me, a very important benefit that we can share, but I think there are even more. That's two examples I wanted to share.
Okay, and viewed from both the Airbus, the OEM side, but also the technology provider side, how can you inject trust from your side?
I think trust starts with transparency, showing the assumptions that we take, also the risks and opportunities we see to make sure we can then develop a common understanding. And I think, and this is something which probably has maybe suffered a bit during COVID times, it's also making sure the people that are behind this, they know each other. There's a human relationship between it, because I guess you see it every day. Those customers that you have a personal relationship with, it's easier for you to have a transparent conversation and trust them. So I think this is something we also, and this is a good event to do so, we have to develop jointly.
And maybe an answer at the same time, a question, of course, question to Airbus and Safran. Is a 4PL, I would read that as a service provider, external service provider, considered, which bridges supplier and OEM with high data quality to control the end-to-end supply chain? Is there something in the making?
So yeah, I don't know if you want to, maybe I should say, yeah, we've talked a lot about the theory of the supply chain, which everybody understands, and everybody is willing to apply this theory, and what is preventing us today from making it fluid and efficient is probably the digital continuity between our different business, even sometimes within our own businesses, because we have scarce ERPs everywhere. And so definitely there are already existing tools. And first, if we want to cascade the top down and to get the bottom up information, everyone, and I say everyone, it means at any level of the supply chain, everyone should target to have a tool to cascade the demand. So there are some tools. We are using at Safran, for example, a tool which is called Air Supply. But there are other tools, and the most important, everybody should target a digital tool, because it's the start. We talk a lot about data, but if there is no tool, there is no data.
So what is missing in concrete terms to make this whole data flow seamless?
Not all the suppliers have already engaged into such tools.
Okay.
And the second step, of course, will be the digital continuity. So how we populate the data once the data is available into a platform. I think Jürgen mentioned Nextera. There are some other steps that we can do using our own tools. But the most important, how do we create the data that we need to share?
I think 4PL is a great concept, and I understand the theory, and it makes sense. Deploying it in an industrial system with the complexity of Airbus, for example, is quite a challenge, because there is no perfect 4PL system adapted to the Airbus way of doing things, the way we express our demand, the way we manage logistics in the different sites where we are. So either we find a perfect 4PL solution adapted to what I would call the Airbus way, or it doesn't work, because with everything we have to do, transforming our processes so they will fit eventually one 4PL standard, I think is a very ambitious challenge that I don't see today happening.
I understand that there's also an issue of governance of data exchange, the rules by which you sort of work. Is there anything, Christoph, you can say to suppliers that can give them confidence or encourage them to actually participate in those tools so that we get seamless flows?
Yes, I hope I don't have to encourage the suppliers. It's the only thing that it will work.
And in that respect, Marjolaine, how important is this time collaboration between OEMs, meaning Airbus and Boeing, so that they agree on the same kind of data protocols?
Yeah, that's part of the how quickly we'll be able to digitalize the exchange between us and the different levels of the supply chain. That's for me a topic. If you take, for example, Safran, we have like 10 or 20 customers. Each of them, or not each of them, but we are using different digital collaboration tools. So for us, it takes a lot of time somehow to make sure our internal systems are connected with the different tools. So Safran is a large group. We are able to handle that. Definitely, if we perpetuate this complexity of tools and data sharing at lower level of the supply chain, I'm not sure our suppliers will be able to handle this complexity. So this is why we would like at least to have some standard platforms for lower level of the supply chain to facilitate their life. And so if we can at least as OEMs agree on the standards, it will probably help cascading and making sure any level of the supply chain is able to have a digital tool which will not be very, very costly.
And are such standards in the making, or is this really a topic that needs to be addressed now in OEM to OEM standards?
At least there are some, air supply, I mentioned air supply now is somehow a platform which starts to be widespread, but that's not the only one, and that's for me still an open question.
What kind of technologies are you using internally to see who's a reliable supplier?
It's for Safran?
Yeah, actually for both of you, sorry. And maybe you want to also comment on this, what you see from the outside.
So first, for each of our suppliers, we are checking the reliability on time delivery and on quality delivery. So that's the first KPIs that we are using. On the more longer term, we are also performing risk assessments to make sure that the supplier is ready for what's ahead. And we are also, as most of the OEMs now, developing our CSR policy with responsible purchasing, with decarbonization, with human rights. And so all of those aspects will help us evaluate what will be the supplier of the future for us.
And you use the same tools to assess your performance towards Airbus or Boeing, or is that a different set of tools then?
So there are multiple answers. I think for the decarbonization, we are all converging on CDP or SBTI. For the purchasing responsible, for supplier responsibility, I think we've converged on a specific tool as well. So there is a momentum into the aeronautical industry to have same tools to evaluate the reliability of the supplier.
Yeah, maybe one comment on that. I think we've heard from the conversation that we talk in all cases about distributed systems, whether they are across the supply chain or even within the organizations. Imagining that one organization has a multitude of ERP systems automatically generates inefficiencies in the system. And at the same time, we hear, there were a couple of questions about what is the gain maybe for the lower tier suppliers to share information, etc. So it is also about incentivization. Like if you share transparent information, you should get something in exchange. And this is again something we talk, things like digital assets, etc., which are very futuristic, maybe looking, but maybe something that can be really practically implemented. And I believe there is also a question of change of mindset, kind of. When we work in distributed environments, we probably have to look at technologies which operate in a distributed, in an open way, while respecting the requirements on data security, IP protection, etc. And this is unlikely, my own perspective, to be achieved with, let's say, everyone shares one big cloud with one big platform, especially when we talk about competitors, right? Often there are likely efficiencies which can be achieved if there is a data which is transparent, traceable, which is used the same for example, Boeing and Airbus, right? Many suppliers probably deliver almost the same thing to both parties, etc. So looking at the mindset of openness while respecting data security, I believe is maybe one of the future steps from technological perspective.
Maybe you can just continue before I pass on the question to your colleagues. If we come to the last point, the data protection, cybersecurity point, what role does this really play in practice for you in let's say, it's a supply chain transparency, created end-to-end, and how to best get there?
Yeah, so I believe these requirements in terms of cybersecurity, right? Because when we exchange the information, there is directly, especially during this security situation that we have in Europe and elsewhere, vectors of attack with respect to the data. So again, singular platforms are particularly in danger of that. So this is one of the main aspects why we are the evangelists of distributed ledger technologies, of blockchain systems, because they really allow to verify that what you have sent, I have received exactly the same thing, and confirm what process has been applied on certain data, and that someone did not add a little bit of a claim that my steel is or not from Russia, and that I can change the information 1 week later when Airbus finds, oh, you actually really have it from Russia. No, I have it from Poland. You know, these kind of aspects are today difficult to demonstrate. So this is why we believe distribution and this openness while respecting data security is a key element.
I think I can only agree. In Germany, we have a saying, trust is good, control is better.
Lenin.
And yes, if we go to a supply chain transparency based on trust, and I think this is where the industry has to go, we have to make sure we put all our data into safe hands in the first thing, and to the more and more increased level of digital integration, we don't create vectors of attack for our business.
Marjolaine, anything to add from your side, or?
I like the trust and control.
in that sense, I have one question for you, Christoph. Here comes from the audience. How does Skywise interact with Airbus digital supply chain tools?
It does today, and it will do even more so in the future. It's our big data lake in which we gather all the data which is coming from the fleet, but also from our internal processes and manufacturing. And it's a great opportunity, a great way to cross-check our macro assumptions, but especially, and I saw there was a question on the aftermarket, to make sure we have real-time fleet data in order to manage and adjust the in-service demand for spare parts, for example. And you might not ask the question, but I'm interested in having a say on this. How does Airbus and Safran read the aftermarket? The increased aircraft production is leading to depleted stocks on the aftermarket. I think this is the wrong way to address it. It's creating great opportunities for the aftermarket. Today, obviously, it's a bit of an issue because we are in a supply-constrained environment. But if we manage to get all these aircraft out and they will fly for 30, 40 years, it's great opportunities for the aftermarket where, if I have well understood, a lot of our suppliers make good business. So it shouldn't be a contradiction.
Great. I'm afraid we're starting to run out of time. I think we have covered most of the questions from the audience, not all. Apologies for that. Yeah. But I would like to close on a very, first of all, positive and then a sort of thoughtful note. Positive is, I think, if there's one thing that sort of unites you all agree we need this transparency. And that's great. Yeah. And from what I see also in the audience, I get the same feeling. Yeah, so I think we have a super basis. Yeah. I think there's a number of enablers which we discussed today, which are critical, and we are not there yet. Yeah. The first one, which probably has nothing to do really with the transparency of supply chain as such, is, I would say, what you call the basic trust. Yeah, I mean, we need stable kind of commitments, and we need to be reliable. Yeah. If that is not the case, then it's difficult to create trust elsewhere. So I think that's a very important one, yeah, even if it's not completely in the topic. Yeah. Secondly, I think everybody also agrees is we need to all be linked together by ideally one system or at least decently connected systems. Yeah. So today not everybody is sharing in, so it's like an aircraft. You can't deliver an aircraft if one part is missing. Yeah. So it's a little bit similar here, and a lot of work to do there. Yeah? And last but not least, it should be one system or at least one standard, yeah? And not confronting especially lower tiers with different standards from different suppliers, from different OEMs, which again I think is a big area where progress needs to be made. Yeah? But again, the good news is I think there's a great consensus in this industry that we need transparency. So we can now start working on these topics which are left open. Thanks a lot for your contribution, and everybody else, I would like to wish you a great rest of the day and more good presentations to follow.